Fine. So, Achat, so I'll start off with like I started in physics, in math, with what mathematics is. So again, since this is the first chapter of physics, I would ideally start off with what exactly is physics, and then we can, you know, build on it, and we can then cover the first topic of physics, which is force, work, per energy. So, like last time, I will like mathematics. I'll go slow on because it's the first class, and then we'll see how much we cover, and then whatever is left, we'll start off again in the next class. Okay. So I think you will have had the class quiz in the other classes taken in the class. I have not done that again this time. So from next week, both math and physics will be having the class quizzes in the class itself. Okay, at the end of the class. Because this is the first class, there will be not much topic that is covered. So that is why I have not kept the class quiz in the class. Okay. So ठीक है. So physics. So you've been again studying physics since which class? I think class 5, 6 was the first time when physics came in into your curriculum. Yes or no? Class 6. Yes. So Shiny, I think you can change your chat option to everyone instead of only me, because that would be easier. Everyone can get it, see what you're saying. Okay. So anyway, so since you have been studying it for the last 3.5 years or so, I believe you would have some understanding of what physics is, and you would have definitely come through across a chapter which asked and talked about what physics is all about. So again, I want you guys to tell me what your understanding of physics is, and then we can spend the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes on this topic itself about what physics is. So Shani is saying that physics is about what is happening around us. Okay. Maniratna, Sankirtans, study of unit measurements and many machines. Unit measurements. Okay. So Sankirtans has another definition, which is it's a branch of science concerned with the nature and properties of matter and energy. Nature and property. Okay, fine. I think good enough, but I will give you a slightly different understanding of what physics. I have a very different understanding of what physics is. Have you guys heard of this name, Richard P. Feynman? Feynman. No, acha. So this person had been in the recent times. So you guys know about this person, who is the most famous physicist alive that you know of? Alive, physicist who is alive. Anyone? Have you heard of Alive now? Yes, yes, Alive right now in 2021. No. Wait, Ayush is joining. Let him connect his audio too. What about Sankirtan and Maniratna? Do you know about any person who is alive yet? Any physicist, famous physicist who is alive? No. Okay. Have you heard of this name? Stephen Hawking. Yes. So this person is still alive, and this person is, yes. So this is one of the most famous physicists who is still alive. I think you're in class 10, right? So it was my class 10 when I had read one of his books, which the name of it is Brief History of Time. So in this book, this person, Mr. Stephen Hawking, has written very well how about his version of the history of time, right from Big Bang until now. And he has explained a lot of scientific and physical phenomena, a lot of things about physics, but he has done so. Yes, he's more than an astrophysicist. He is a theoretical physicist. And he has an extensive interest in the concept of relativity and quantum mechanics, and because of that he has done a lot of work about black holes. And yes, so have you guys heard about this book or read this book, Brief History of Time? You have heard. So I think you should read this book definitely. I guess there would be 1 minute here. Something happened. Where did the screen go? Yeah. So you guys should read it. So he has done a very pretty good job in explaining it in very layman terms, the highest concepts of physics. What do you mean in short? What is quantum mechanics in short? I'll come to that. I'll probably come to quantum mechanics. Why in short? I'll go in depth about quantum mechanics and about relativity also. Yes. So have you guys been able to check out the discussion forum of EduTime in the ELC app? Discussion forum देखे क्या? No. ठीक है. Once you get the chance, yesterday I put in a post about relativity in that. Again trying to explain it in very simplistic terms what relativity is. So I was primarily talking about speed of light in that. Okay, so we'll come to it. We'll come to touch upon it. So we were talking about Mr. Richard P. Feynman, and then I started talking about Mr. Stephen Hawking. So you know Stephen Hawking, and the post that he holds right now. Google up which post. The name is EduDime Learning Companion. If you are registered with EduDime, you would have gotten the login credentials with in a message. SMS आया होगा एक. अगर register नहीं किए हैं, then you can register for this. I guess I don't know if the app will be visible or not, but you can download the app definitely. You can register on it yourself also, but I don't know if the forum will be visible to it or not. Okay. So yeah, so I was talking about Stephen Hawking. So Stephen Hawking is the current stalwart of physics, right? So find out, Google up about him a bit, and if you get the time, read up this book that he has written, right? So like Stephen Hawking is today, so one of the most famous physicians of today. So the post that he holds, he is a professor in a university. So the post is a HOD of a university of the physics department. So the post that he holds right now was held in his time by Mr. Richard P. Feynman. And before him, once upon a time, this post was held by someone called Mr. Albert Einstein. Right. So these guys are in that league of physicists who have changed the world, or the way we see the world, the way we study physics. So my favorite topic about Richard P. Feynman's lectures or teachings is that the way he used to talk about what physics is. So that is something that I'm going to try and share with you, and I hope you will be able to appreciate it. Right. So it's a very basic thing what he says. What he says is, so say you, how many of us are here? We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, including me. So we have Ayush, Maniratna, Shayani, Sankirtan, and myself. So suppose we are friends, okay? Suppose we are friends and say Sankirtan is a very good chess player. So Sankirtan is an extremely good chess player and I am not, I have no idea what chess is all about. So suppose Sankirtan and I are very good friends and we hang out almost every day. But what happens is at the end of the day, around evening, Sankirtan goes away every day to play chess player, not chess player. Yeah. So suppose Sankirtan is a very good player of chess and he loves to play chess. And I have no idea what chess is all about. I do not care about chess also, suppose. And but I am very interested in being a friend with Sankirtan. And what happens every day, say at 5 o'clock, Sankirtan goes out to play chess with his chess buddies. Okay. And then I feel very left out. I have something what I call FOMO or what people call FOMO, fear of missing out. I think the Sankirtan is doing something very cool and I am missing out on it. So one fine day I go and ask Sankirtan, please tell me what chess is all about. And Sankirtan says, no, I don't. I know you are not interested in chess. I will not teach it to you because I do not have the patience. I would rather play chess. So, but then I plead him, please teach me. But Sankirtan does not at all agree with me. Okay, so what do I do then? I go back home dejected. ठीक है तुम खेल लो अपना chess. You play your chess. I'll also see what to do. Next day I come back with a good plan. I tell him, do one thing, Sankirtan. You let me accompany you with to your chess game. I'll observe your games, and then I'll try to learn myself by observing you what chess is all about. Okay. So Sankirtan says, yeah, there's no harm to it. So far, you agree to be quiet and not disturb us playing. We'll take you to. I'll take you to the chess club that we have, and we'll play chess together. And you can see the when we are playing chess together. I'm like, fine, great. So that day at 6 o'clock, again Sankirtan goes, I follow him. And then there I see Ayush, Maniratna, and Shayani playing chess. So there are two games of chess happening, one between Sankirtan versus Ayush, and another one, Maniratna versus Shayani. Okay. There are two chess matches happening, and I am a mere observer who has no idea about what chess is all about. Okay, and then what do we have? I see that there are two chess boards. This is the first time I have seen any board, for example, suppose. And I see that there are 8 rows and 8 columns. Right. I see that that is true for both the boards that are there. And there is one black, one white, one black, one white, one black again, then white again. So that continues across the board. Again, across both the boards, not only in one board, both the boards. Sorry, there's some mistakes there, but anyway, both the boards have that same pattern of black and white that I can see. So I figure out from seeing this that possibly this is the arena where chess is played. So this might be important for chess. Then I also see that there are different things that are laid down upon here. So there is something with a flat head here. There is something that looks like a horse over here. There is something with a triangle you're looking over here. There is something with a plus sign on its head over here. There is something with a this kind of sign on its head sitting over here. And so on and so forth. This repeats after this. Whatever was there before this has repeated over here after this. And over here, I can see that there are similar looking smaller number of chess in black. And on the other side, the same thing is repeated in white. And I see the same thing over here also. So I figure out, okay, these might be the elements of chess. So these might also be important. And then the game of chess begins. I see here that Sankirtan has played one of the small pawns forward 2 houses. And then I saw over here, Maniratna has also played the smaller up forward 2 houses over there. I thought, okay, fine. So in chess, you play the smaller items forward 2 houses. Like, fine. So I make a note of this. I understand this. Then after some time, what I see that Shayani now, she also has had a lot of 8 of the smaller ones. Instead of pushing 2 houses, she just pushed it 1 house. And I have a confusion. Like, how is this possible? These guys were pushing it 2 houses. I was pushing it for Shiny is pushing it for 1 house. Now, how is this possible? But then I thought, I do not know anything about chess. These guys have been playing it for some time, and clearly, when Shiny made that move, Maniratna did not say anything. So possibly both are correct. So now I make another input in my head. So the smaller elements possibly can move 1 house or 2 houses. Both are possible. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically forming theories about your chess game. So your chess game continues. I figure out a lot of things. I figure out that this flat-headed thing can go straight up to any number of houses towards the right or left, front or back. This I figured out. I figured out this is the most powerful item which can go crosswise, front, back, and any number of houses. This chessman with a plus on its head seems to be very important, but it cannot. It's weaker than this small pawn because it cannot move more than one single block in either of the direction. It can move in any of the direction, but it can move only one direction. This chessman, the triangular one, I can see it can move right, left, diagonally, forward or backward. So basically, diagonally, it can move as many number of steps as it wants. This horse-looking chessman seemed to be very interesting because it was moving 1, 2, and then side. So I decided to call it. I will call it 1-2 side movement. Fine, no problem. So because it is me, I am explaining it to. I understood it is 1-2 side. I called it the 1-2 side movement. Okay, so sometime back I also saw that this man is going 1-2 side. So I said, fine, this is also following the same pattern. So I now understand. And all this that I understood, I saw this in the first day itself. Okay, suppose I understood this and understood it in the first day itself. So now what happened? I kept on watching the game of chess every day that Sankirtan, Ayush, Maniratna, and Shiny plays. And some Purnima has also come in right now. So probably Purnima also comes in one of these games, some of these games, and I see them play. And I more or less what understood basic understanding that I made on the first day seems to be correct all throughout the 7 days. And I am pretty confident that now I know what is chess all about. And I figured out that the chessman that has plus on its head, which looks like the most important chessman, if this cannot move anymore, then people win the game. So the opponent wins if one chessman cannot move. If this is a black chessman which cannot move, then white wins. If it is the white chessman that cannot move, then black wins. This is something I have figured out over the time of observation. Now what happens? I am very confident that I know everything there is to know about chess because I have seen it. Now one fine day, what is happening? So there is a very heated match going on between, say, Shayani and Ayush. So this is Shayani versus Ayush that is going on today on the 7th day. And what I see suddenly in this match, so I have the chessboard again. Everything was going on as I knew it should go on. Okay, everything was going on as it should go on, and the things were getting very heated. A lot of chessmen were getting killed. I had no idea who is going to win, but it was looking very interesting. And I finally figured out why Sankirtan really loves chess so much. But then one strange thing happened. What happened? I suddenly saw that there was this flat-headed black thing over here and the important looking plus signed man over here. So flat and pass, I know that this can move any direction as it wants to. So far it's front and back and right and left. I know this can move all directions also, but only one step. Right, yeah, absolutely. That is what happens, Sankirtan. Suddenly what I saw that this person, Shayani, what she did right now, she just exchanged them. She just exchanged them and the plus came here and the flat-headed guy came here. And I lost my cool. I said, this is absolute, utter... no, this is not pie. This is a flat-headed chessman. So, and I told Shayani, this is something wrong. You cannot do this, Shayani. I know this is supposed to move only one house. How has it moved 2 houses? And how has it... This I understood why it moved here, but you are supposed to move only one chessman at a time. I know that because I've been observing you for the last 7 days. How could you do this? This is not right. So then Sankirtan warns me. I told you, so far you do not say anything. You can watch the game of chess and learn from it. So then anyway, my ego gets hurt. Okay, you can learn it if you want to. It's not really important. If you get the story, that is what is more important over here. Yeah. So, but Sankit, that reminds me that I had promised that I'll keep quiet. And then finally, I remember, fine, yeah, these guys know more than me in chess. This probably would have been a correct move. It was not correct for me to comment on this. Now again, a month passes on, a month passes by, and then suddenly we have Purnima and Maniratna playing. Okay. And then on that day again, so we have the next match in which is Purnima versus Maniratna. In that, what is happening? I'm seeing that there is this horse-looking guy. I'll just mention H over here. I'll just mention H over here. And I know the moving looking guy moves 1, 2 and side. 1, 2 and side. I know this is the movement allowed. And suddenly what Purnima does, she starts moving the horse like this. Left, right and back. And I am again pissed off. I have been watching Game of Chess for a month. And you have suddenly done an illegal move. You are not allowed to do this illegal move. I know what I have seen. I know what I have learned. And this is not right. You are supposed to go front and right or left, or back or right and left. Sankirtan again reminds me. Dekho, I have told you, you should observe and learn. Whatever we are doing is right. And whatever you are saying is wrong is not wrong. You are a mere observer, you should observe it. So then again, I get dejected, but I realize that yes, I really do not know what chess is all about. And possibly it would be, if this is legal, and if this is legal, and if this is legal, and if this is also legal, then possibly the left up, left down, right up, right down would also be legal. So and then I said then the 1, 2 and left and 1, 2 and right will not be a good nomenclature. I'll have to change my name. I will now call it 1, 2 and a half. So there is a 2.5 chal that a horse takes. I figured out on this day after watching it for 30 days. Now let us really understand what Richard B. Feynman said. So Mr. Feynman is one of the best professors in physics that the world has ever seen. He used to take this example in every single first class of physics and say every student, see, this game of chess that Sankirtan, Ayush, Maniratna, Purnima and Shayani have been playing is the nature. And me, Dhruv, I am the observer. The observer has no idea about how the nature works, has absolutely no clue. We human beings, we observers have no idea about how the nature works. We are mere observers. And while observing, we are picking up certain rules. We are trying to build our own inferences of what we are observing. And once we have tried to find out inferences, once we see that a lot of these inferences are converging at a certain point, we then create something called theories, right? And then when we try theories, we try to see if these theories are actually explaining everything that is there in the world. And we try to actually do experiments and find out if our theories are actually explaining all the phenomena that is there in the world. And if our theories are able to easily explain different phenomena in the world. If one theory is able to explain what previously 3 theories used to explain, then I would have a better theory. So I'm trying to come up with simpler and simpler rules. So for example, the 2.5 rules was a better nomenclature for the horse. Instead of saying it was a 1, 2 left, 1, 2 right, or a left up, left down, or right up, right down. This was a better explanation. 2.5 was a better nomenclature of explaining all of these moves that the horse was making. So similarly in physics, we are always trying to come up with simpler theories, and we keep on conducting experiments and we keep on observing the universe, the nature. And so far, our theories are able to explain all the phenomena that is happening. The theories hold. As soon as one new phenomena comes, which cannot be explained by a theory, we have to change the theory. We have to discard the old theory. Like I had discarded this 1, 2 left and 1, 2 right theory. Like I had discarded the concept that king can only move left, right, front, back, only one place, when I saw the castling happening between the king and the flat-headed element. Similarly, whenever any new phenomena occurs, which our existing theories cannot explain, we have to reject the theory. We cannot say that the nature is not following the law. The nature is not supposed to follow the law. You are supposed to come up with better laws and better theories that explains what the nature is doing. Because the nature is absolute, we are observers. Our physics is not absolute. Our physics is derivative of the real phenomena that is happening in the nature. So what is physics? What is physics really? Physics is simply an observation of the nature. To create inferences and theories that we try to check out, that we try to compare with real life phenomena, and we also change our understanding. We also change our understanding when when old theories are proven wrong. And physics has what did you write? One of the most sacred laws of physics that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light in vacuum. But this speed has been smashed in a recent experiment, which a laser pulse travels more than 300 times the speed of light. I will check this out, but I'll come to this point. Okay, let me just complete this slide and then I'll come to this point about speed of light. Okay, so speed of light is all about, physics has 4 steps. One is observation, then is inference, then we have theories, when a lot of inferences can be clubbed together and we can make simpler and simpler theories. And then finally, we have experimentation or testing. So this is what physics is. This is what my understanding of physics is, and I think this is the most beautiful understanding of what physics could be. This is the entirety of physics. Is this clear? Everybody is with me so far? Yes, absolutely. Now, so there are multiple fields of physics. There is something called classical physics. Okay, in which what we try to explain is we try to explain the daily life phenomena. Okay, we try to explain daily life phenomena using classical physics. This is very simple to understand, simple to apply, has simple formulas, and the champion of this type of physics has been Mr. Newton, or Sir Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. Okay, then we have something called relativity. When we are talking about very high, big masses, so cosmic level masses, planets, stars, black holes, and when we're talking about very high speeds, speed of light, speed of rockets, speed of rocket is also very small the speed. So when we are approaching the speed of light, we have this topic called, so big masses, high speed. We have a field of physics which is relativity, the champion of which we all know is Mr. Einstein. That explains. So relativity can explain all the classical physics phenomena also, but is a bit more complicated, a bit more difficult to understand, has bigger equations. But classical physics cannot explain a lot of phenomena that happens in the big masses and high speeds. So relativity in that sense is able to explain much more than classical physics can. It's a more modern science, more modern form of physics. However, classical physics has not entirely been debunked or proven wrong, because this still holds. So classical physics is like an approximation. Yes, Ankit, one of the most famous equations that he has given is E equals to mc square. And we'll study this in this about this equation in this subtopic itself in the next 4 to 5 classes. And So what I was saying is classical physics has not been proven wrong. What we have just done is we have said that classical physics is not true for bigger masses and higher speed. So we have not let go of classical physics. Classical physics is like an approximation of relativity because it is able to explain the normal phenomena when we are talking about smaller masses and when we are talking about less speeds, normal life level speeds, 30, 40 kilometer per hour, 200, 500 kilometer per hour, or even 3 kilometer per second. What is the speed of the fastest rockets in the world right now? Then came somebody called, there is another field called quantum physics. So quantum physics, so like this is about very high masses, very high speed. Quantum physics is all about very, very small particles. Right? So quantum physics, so a lot of phenomena that happens at the atomic level or at the subatomic level cannot be explained by classical physics, cannot be explained by relativity. So we have this new field of physics, which is called quantum physics, which can explain everything that happens in the real world. It can explain most of the things that happens at the high speed and bigger masses, except the concept of gravitation. Okay, and it can explain everything in the field of small particles. Similarly, relativity can explain everything in the classical world. It can explain everything in the big masses and high speed, except the concept of gravitation. Okay, there is an approximation in relativity of how gravitation comes to be and what is the reason of gravitation and all that, but it doesn't really is not really able to explain gravitation very well. But the additional thing that quantum mechanics is able to explain is about the smallest particles that exist. So in that sense, quantum mechanics is the most modern and most accurate way of explaining things. But however, it's easier to use, still it is easier to use relativity when we talk about higher masses, and it's easier to use quantum mechanics when we talk about small particles. Relativity is also able to explain some bit of small particle phenomena. Like for example, we'll get to it. We'll get to it when we get to it. But however, it is easier to use to it is easier used to explain and work and apply it in big masses and higher speeds. So this is what quantum physics is all about. Okay, and we have one person called Max Planck, who is the father of quantum physics, quantum mechanics. There have been multiple other uh, people who have worked in quantum mechanics, one of them being Heisenberg. When you study atomic structure in class 10, 11, you will be studying about this guy called Heisenberg. He's one of the, again, one of the best scientists that the world has ever seen in the field of quantum physics. He has made some statements which was very difficult to make for scientists. He has literally said something that we cannot measure accurately certain things. There is a limitation to the theoretical level of accuracy that any measurement can hold, and that is very difficult to say for a scientist. And he has proven that, and we have used that nowadays to explain a lot of phenomena at the quantum level, at the smallest atomic subatomic levels. So great scientist over here, Mr. Heisenberg. And so yeah, this is all about it. So like you see, both quantum physics and relativity still struggle to explain the phenomena of gravity. Classical physics has an explanation of gravity, but right. So Heisenberg is also one of the hardest bosses of Resident Evil. Agreed. Heisenberg is also the name of a character in one of the best TV series that has come in the world, which is called Breaking Bad. Okay, so what the main character takes a pseudonym of Heisenberg. He is a chemistry teacher, and since Heisenberg has led to the modern understanding of atomic structures and all, so he takes up the name of Heisenberg, and he does a lot of bad things. He breaks bad. So it's also a very interesting series. If you ever get the time, do watch it. Of course, do not harm your studies while watching it, but it's a very interesting series to watch. Anyway, so like I was saying, so there is classical physics, relativity, and in this we have two fields: general relativity and special relativity. Okay, and then we have quantum physics. So when we talk about these three fields, classical mechanics, classical physics has a way to explain gravitation. or rather predict how gravitation is going to behave. It does not explain why gravitation exists. Relativity similarly, quantum mechanics similarly cannot explain, even classical mechanics cannot explain why gravitation exists. So we are still in the search of something. And also we see that quantum mechanics is difficult to explain in the high speed scenarios. Relativity is difficult to apply in the high speed scenarios. Relativity is very difficult to apply in the small quantums, in the smallest atomic level mechanics that we have. And as a result, we are still in search. So there has been so what is physics all about? Physics right now is all about searching for the theory of everything. So the best people, so people who have come up with the new concept called string theory. And there are a lot of other attempts to unify classical physics, relativity, and quantum physics, trying to find out one single law which explains all the phenomena that happens across the world, or a set of laws which explains all the phenomena that happens across the world, across the universe rather. So people are attempting to find the theory of everything, and the one of the best, most famous, and most dedicated people to this cause is none other than Mr. Stephen Hawking. And like I was talking about brief history of time, this guy has also written a book for layman for explaining this concept and detailed concepts of physics in layman terms in a book called Theory of Everything. So in this, he tries to explain what all is going on in the pursuit of theory of everything, the unified theory of everything that is the current pursuit in physics, right? Clear so far? Everybody with me? Yes. So now Sankirtan had asked a question. I'll take that now. So he is saying that recently one photon apparently has traveled at 300 times the speed of light, which is denoted by the letter c. We have it in relativity that c is the universal constant, and nothing can cross the speed of c. We'll see in one of the classes why we cannot cross the speed of light. And he says that apparently this has been broken down. But I'll talk about something else here. In quantum mechanics, there is a concept called quantum entanglement. What really happens in quantum entanglement? Suppose there are two particles that are bound together. And this is something that actually happens in the real world. This is an observation. So at a subatomic level, suppose these two particles were bound together. Okay. Often what happens, there is some sort of an entanglement between the two. What does that entanglement mean? So suppose this is particle A and suppose this is particle B, which are supposedly entangled with each other. Entanglement means that if you do effect, so if you move particle A, if you push particle A towards one direction, particle B will also automatically get moved towards the same direction. Whatever change you try to make in particle A automatically happens in particle B also, without us doing anything on particle B. So if you keep particle, and this has happened in huge proportion, what has happened? So suppose particle A and particle B are 1 kilometer away, right? And we know that the speed of light is 300,000 kilometer per second, right? So if you affect particle A in any way, particle B instantly gets affected. Ideally, if they are 1 kilometer away, I would expect 1 divided by 300,000 seconds delay, right? That delay is not there. So there is something that is happening, some information that is traveling between A and B, and that is traveling absolutely instantly. So although we said that elements cannot travel faster than speed of light, we always knew that there is something else that we do not know about that travels almost instantly, or way more quickly than we have a resolution to measure. right? So, and we can measure up to nanoseconds. We can measure even below nanoseconds. We can measure in 10 to the power 5 minus 5 nanoseconds. And the difference between the time after affecting particle A, that a particle B gets affected without us doing anything, is less than this time, because we cannot register any difference in time. It's almost instantly. So as a result, there are definitely things which are traveling faster than the speed of light. There is no information in the form of electromagnetic rays or waves that are moving from particle A to B, because that would have taken this much amount of time delay. Something else is happening altogether and we cannot explain it so far. So we are trying to explain that this phenomena. If we do that, we'll have a better answer to this question. But yeah, I don't think this is the upper limit, universal upper limit. This is not the upper limit. And as about this specific example, I will get in depth of it. I would suggest Sankirtan, you should get into that EduTime Learning Companion and ask this question. I will research a bit on it and try to verify if this is true or not, and give my 2 cents about it after I've read in more detail about this specific phenomenon that you are talking about. All right. So we now have a better understanding of physics, what physics is, yes or no? So Sankirtan, you have to ask it in the EduTime Learning Companion. This is the name of the app. Here there is, if you just register on it, you would see there is something called discussion forum. Underneath it, there is a subtopic called physics. Underneath it, once you open, you will see there is a pen-like button. You can click on it and you can ask this question. I will study it and I will get in to know more about this topic and then answer your question. All right. So this is how you do it. Yes, so I'll just summarize. So physics involves observation, inference, theorizing, and testing. And there are three fields of physics right now: classical, relativity, quantum. And people right now, physicists right now, are after something called theory of everything, trying to come up with empirical laws and simpler theories that can explain all the phenomena that happens in this world. Yeah. So now I'll move on with the topic at hand, and we will be studying significantly about classical physics in our classes. We'll touch upon quantum and relativity as and when the time comes, but we really need to understand classical physics end to end in order to be able to, or not, at least not if end to end, at least some parts of classical physics in great detail, and we should be able to internalize it properly for us to be able to appreciate and come up with a thought process that would be able to appreciate relativity and quantum mechanics. Okay. So since this is to do with classical physics is to do with the daily phenomena that we can see in our everyday life. So a study of classical physics actually helps us to develop that acumen of observing, inferring, theorizing, and testing out different theories and observations. And that is exactly what we're going to do in the classes, in the physics classes. Okay. So the stalwart of classical physics has been Mr. Sir Isaac Newton. He has been the president of the Royal Society back in his time. He was so famous back in Britain that he was made the president of the Royal Society, the Queen's Society, and the Society of Royals of England, of Great Britain, of England, Ireland, and Scotland. And so he was a pretty famous guy. And can you tell me what all he has contributed in to science and math? Obviously, he has contributed about the laws of motion, gravitation. What else do you know? Yes, apart from the motion and gravitation, everybody knows about. Apart from this, no idea, nahi? No. So he has talked a lot about light, reflection, refraction, he has developed a field of science, field of math rather, called calculus. He's the father of calculus. What else? He has done a multiple other things. So I would suggest you Google up this name. Google up Sir Isaac Newton. Since yes, absolutely, Sankirtan. So I would want you to Google up what Sir Isaac Newton is. I will be putting across my phone number here, WhatsApp number. Right. So I want you guys to write something, find out all the contributions that Newton has made to the field of science and math, to the field of science, math, technology, science, math, science, technology, engineering, math, in the fields of STEM, and then just send me across your understanding. Okay, you take a pen and a paper, write down what all things that Newton has contributed to our world, and then we can interact more in the next class about it. I want all the 5 of you to send me this right now. Okay? Agreed? Shall I I want you to send it by Monday, Tuesday. Do not delay it much further. Today is Sunday. By Tuesday, you send it. Okay. So then let us get into the topic of the day, which is we are going to study force, work, power, and energy. And we are going to spend the next 4 to 5 days studying it. So before, I have you guys heard of Newton's laws of motion? Yes. So can you tell me what the first law of motion is? First law of motion? What is first law of motion? Newton's first law of motion. Inertia. So Newton's first law of motion talks about inertia. Okay. Newton's first law of motion says inertia does not change until a force acts. So inertia can only be disturbed by force. And do you know that the word force was created by Newton? There was no word called force before Newton was there, or Newton's first law of motion was there. Did you know this? Absolutely, Sankirtan. So it says that an object at rest will remain at rest, and an object will motion in a specific direction will continue in the same constant motion in that same specific direction unless something called a force acts upon it. In this first law, Newton has actually introduced the concept of inertia, which is the tendency of a body to be at rest and tendency of the body to not change its motion, not change its state of motion, and the concept of force. So there was nothing called force before Newton came to us. What is the second law of motion all about? So first law of motion introduces force. No. Second law of motion is not F equals to ms. F equals to ma is one of a simplified takeaways. It's a simplified takeaways from the second law of motion. Yeah, so he says, so here he tries to explain how to measure force. He says that force is equal to the rate of change of momentum. And what is the third law all about? So if I write the third law over here, what is the third law all about? Action reaction force. So to every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So here he is talking about another feature of force, in which he says such force cannot be alone. Force comes in pairs. So he has introduces force, he talks about measurement of force, and he introduces a key feature of force in which he says that forces come in pairs and equal and opposite pairs. Okay, these are the 3 laws. Fine. So why I am most interested, and a lot of people are most interested in the second law. I am most interested in the word called momentum. So what exactly is momentum? Momentum ki hai? And you have been in my class yesterday. I don't want you to give that momentum is equal to mass into velocity. That is the formula of momentum. What exactly is momentum? What do you understand by momentum? Any takers? কি হলো? Momentum কি হয়? The ability of increasing or developing what? Okay, so that is very unfortunate. Na? So Newton says, this is again cheating. So Newton's laws of motion says that force is rate of change of momentum, and you are saying momentum is ability to create force. This is cheating. This is absolute cheating. This is like saying what is 1 plus 1? You say it is equal to 2. What is 2? 2 is equal to 1 plus 1. This should not be the way of defining things. So, for example, I have a baby now. So, his name is Narendranath Bakshi, and his also name is Shivan. So, if I say that Narendranath Bakshi is Shivan and Shivan is Narendranath Bakshi, I have not said anything about the person in general. So, I can always say that he is 4.5 months old. He was born on January 11th. So, all this information would make more sense. So again, Sankirtan, I know you have Googled this up right now. So mass into velocity is another way of cheating. So you are giving me the formula of momentum instead of giving me an explanation of what momentum is. I know you can do better. You have been studying about momentum right from class 6 and 7. 2-3 years. Okay, I will explain to you what momentum is, but next time onwards, whenever you come across a definition, do not take it at the face value. Okay, so I will give you first. I will tell you how should you write definitions. You should have a qualitative understanding. The first statement that you make in a definition should be a qualitative understanding. You should be able to give in language, proper English or Bengali or Hindi, whatever language you're using, a feel of what you're talking about. The next statement you should be able to give a quantitative understanding. So here in this case, which is momentum is nothing but mass into velocity. Next, you should be able to give other names that the object has, right? You should be able to give what the object comprises of. Next, you should talk about what it does not comprise of. Next, you should talk about some applications of the concept and some examples of the concept. So when you are asked to write a definition, be it for 1 marks, be it for 5 marks, be it for 15 marks, be it for 20 marks, you should at all points cover all these topics. In a 1 mark question, you'll cover them in 1 sentence each, probably having a 5 to 6 sentences. In a 20 mark question, you will be giving a better in-depth explanation of each of these concepts, right? But you should always cover this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 topics. 6 topics about every single concept that you talk about. Clear? So next time onwards, whenever anybody asks you what anything is, do not start off with the quantitative understanding. Start off with the qualitative understanding, because that is the most important. If you have understood or not, that is the intent of asking, right? So I will tell you what momentum is. So this is a bottle. If I throw this bottle at me, or if you throw this bottle at me, what will happen to me? কি হবে আমার দিকে যদি কেউ বোতলটা छोड़े, if somebody throws the bottle, अगर कोई मेरे ऊपर बॉटल फेंकता है, what will happen to me? मैं जोर से फेंक, no, suppose somebody hits me with the bottle. Suppose I have my sister standing 1 feet away from me and she is angry with me, she throws the bottle at me. What will happen to me? I will get hurt. Similarly, I have another thing that is there with me, which is this scale. Okay, it will hurt me, right? So I have this scale. Okay, so now suppose my sister again is 1 feet away or 2 feet away and she throws this scale at me because she was angry. Will it hurt me as much? No. Suppose now my sister is 10 feet away and she throws this bottle at me. Will I get hurt as much? No. Suppose the bottle was empty and my sister threw the bottle at me right from 2 feet away. Would I get hurt so much? No. So what is momentum? The momentum is the ability of an object when hurled at someone to hurt that person. The ability of an object to hurt, the ability of an object to create an impact on hitting another object is called the momentum of that object. So object A, the ability of object A to create an impact, physical impact on object B on being hurled towards it is called momentum. This is a definition that is I have never found in my books. My father had told me this definition when I was in class 3 or class 4 rather, class 4. In my class 4, my dad has told me this definition. I have never found any more apt definition of momentum. The ability of an object to create an impact on another object, physical impact on another object on being hurled towards it is what momentum is. Clear? Is this a good qualitative definition of momentum? Yes. Then we always know that you all know the quantitative definition of momentum. It is mass and velocity. My father had given me a less politically correct answer. He said the ability of my slap hitting you, that's what momentum is. This is the less politically correct, but this is the more politically correct answer. Yeah. So that's about momentum. So now what the first one? So the concept of momentum, the concept of impact was already there when Newton was there. People knew that if things come at us, it will hurt us. If the thing has a bigger mass, it will hurt us more. If the things have smaller velocity, it will hurt us less. If it has a smaller mass, it will hurt us less. If the same object has a higher velocity, it will hurt us more. So Newton capitalized on this existing concept of momentum to give out his laws, right? So I think, is it okay if I extend the class by 10 minutes? If we close at 9 o'clock instead of 8:50? Okay, so I'll continue. So we have talked about momentum today. We'll talk about the concept of force and inertia from the next class. And then we'll be, so because this was an introduction class, so it's natural that we'll be taking some time to arrive at the topics. So, but yeah, we have just reached the interesting part of the chapter, which is momentum, force, and yeah. But I really want to not discuss anything else apart from this diagram. Do you know what this diagram depicts? What is this diagram about? ये क्या है पता है क्या? No. Anybody has any small idea? It's about rockets, but what specifically? So the previous one was about rocket. This looks to me like, I don't know what image is, but this looks to me like the moon mission shuttles that we used to have. I'm not sure if that is the case. No, this is not a preparation of a rocket launch. This is that picture with what we are showing over here. These are different stages. So, I'll give you a hint. Have you heard of a company called SpaceX? Yes. Who is the CEO of this company? Who is the founder, owner of this company? Yes, Elon Musk. He is like Mr. Tony Stark in our real world. He is doing the real stuff. Yes, so this is the SpaceX version of rocket recovery. Okay, so if you guys, I will just give you a link. I'll write it down, note it down probably. I keep on following this link and I get to see beautiful videos of space launches. 1 minute. So it is spacex.com/launches/index.htm. Right. If you go to this link in your free time, do not go to the link now. Note this down. So SpaceX is a space company by Elon Musk. They are targeting that. They are saying that by before 2030, they will send manned mission to moon. Sorry, manned mission to Mars. This guy is talking about colonizing Mars. And so, there are multiple challenges when you talk about colonizing Mars. So number one, we have to understand how this type of space rocket used to, what is the traditional way rockets are launched into space. And we'll come to the next class why we were talking about rockets so much. So what do you see over here? This helicopter, so this aeroplane type of thing, this is the actual vehicle that carried human beings or other things that needed to go to the Mars. This red thing is called the main engine. These smaller rockets are called boosters. So now what used to happen? If you see that there are three types of fire coming out. One is from here, one is from here, one is from here, and there is something that is coming out from the center part also, right? So what actually happens when the rockets generally lifts off? When the lift off happens, during lift off, the gravitational pull is highest on the rocket, and because of all the fuel it is carrying, the rockets are extremely heavy. So you need a very high amount of force for the initial lift off. Okay, so if I really show it over here, so in the traditional rocket, if I see up from here up to here, there is a point where we say is a point of max Q, which is basically a point of maximum aerodynamic pressure. We'll come to this when we come to the topic of aerodynamics and air and fluids. So from the lift off, so this first stage is called the lift off or launch. From the launch to a stage up of max Q, what do we have? We need a lot of, so the earth is trying to pull the rocket back as much as possible. And the atmosphere is also leading to the, slowing down of the rocket as much as possible. So you needed very high thrust onto the rocket. And the thrust was given by these two boosters as well as the main engine. So now what used to happen after that? So once, let us talk about this stage. So once this rocket reached a certain point after which so much pressure was not needed, there was a stage separation in which the boosters were thrown away. So they used to get detached so that the mass becomes smaller, and the boosters generally used to get used up of all their fuel. And then they used to get detached and they used to go, and they were designed in such a way that they will fall on the ocean or they will burn out while they come back in the entry to the atmosphere because of like meteorites get burnt out. So that was how traditionally rockets used to function. Now, when you have such a kind of rocket, what really happens? So and also, so the main engine, after some time, even the main engine used to be discarded, and only the space shuttle, which is this aeroplane type looking part, used to go to the moon, used to go around the earth, go around the moon, wherever we are sending people or things to, and then only this space shuttle used to come back to earth. And only the space shuttle was the part that used to be used and reused. The entire everything else in the rocket system used to be a loss. So, you spend billions of dollars to create one one space project, and you end up losing 70 to 80% of the hardware that you are actually sending out to space. So if you have to create a journey to Mars, what you need to do is you need to have a very cost effective solution. That is number one challenge, cost effectiveness. Because, and the only way to be cost effective is to stop all the losses that is happening when the boosters are getting lost, when the main engine is getting lost. So SpaceX has used the concepts of momentum, inertia, and force, very basic concept but very advanced concepts too, to come up with a new technology in which what happens, that there is a stage separation. So the space, this rocket looks a bit different. So at the head you have, at the top of this rocket you have the main vehicle of interest, which can be the satellite, or can be the part of the rocket which carries people or carries cargo. Okay. Then what you have, then you have something called a second stage engine. Then you have something called the first stage engine. So what happens? So there is launch, there is the point of max Q that I talked about. Sometime after the point of max Q over here, there is a stage called stage separation. At this point, what happens? The first stage engine, the FSC, has almost used up all its fuel, not entire fuel. So we do not have space station in space for fuel. We have the space station in space for observation, and it is not possible to carry things to the space station at the same time. So we keep on having reconnaissance missions where a lot of rockets go to the space station, and then they give, if they need fuel, if they need food, if they need science equipment, they all supply it to them at regular intervals. So very recently, I'll actually tell you the date. SpaceX actually, 1 minute, I just noted down the date. I was watching the last 1 minute. So 3rd July. So 3rd July, this was the last travel to space station. Again, SpaceX has done it. So now once you want to go to Mars, what you have to do? You have to make space travel time cost effective, and you have to actually send multiple rockets one after the other to Mars, because we really need to send supplies to people in Mars once people are there. Similar to what happens in the space station. So you need, space station is a very small thing, small tiny box of metal floating around the Earth somewhere in the space, right? So it is important that the astronauts who are there in the space station, the scientists who are there in the space station, they keep getting the science equipment, they keep getting food, oxygen, everything that they need in the space station. So it is very, very important to not lose 70 to 80% of the items in your rocket kit, or your space project kit, because every time if you do it, it will be very, very costly to send rockets every time. So what SpaceX has been able to do, has been able to at least recover the first stage engine. So there are first stage engine which has been used up to 87 times. So the one that was used on 3rd July has been recovered, was recovered the 87th time on 3rd July. Today there was one more SpaceX mission on sorry, I mean 3rd June, not 3rd July. 3rd June there was one mission. On 6th June there was another mission. And on 6th June, what they did, they were trying to put one satellite onto around the Earth, one new satellite. And this image is from the satellite launch that happened today morning. So basically, 5th night in USA, today morning for India time. So 3rd June, I meant 3rd June, not July. And so 6th June. So this figure is actually the representation of the mission happening today. So what, like I was saying, so there is a first stage engine, and what really happens in the first stage engine is, once it gets separated, so it is not separated after the entire fuel is lost, like used to happen in the boosters. This is separated while there is still some amount of fuel left. And then by means of different designs of, the engine is designed in such a way that the first stage engine, so this is the second stage engine and the rocket moving on. The first stage engine came and followed this path. So the first stage engine rotates, it falls down, it slows down and actually lands head down, lands absolutely vertically on the ground. So if you really want to watch it, I would suggest you go to this spacex.com/launches/index.htm. They have tried it out hundreds of times. After I think some 80 attempts, they were able to get this technology right. And after this, they have had 125 such missions in which they have always been successful. And they are now building bigger versions of this rocket, which will actually take us to Mars. And one more thing about Mars, it is not possible to carry oxygen to Mars. So this company, SpaceX, is also working on, creation of oxygen in Mars by splitting carbon dioxide that has been found in Mars and by splitting frozen water that has been found in the polar caps of Mars. So this is, this company of the future, I guess. And if anybody can take us to Mars, it's possibly these guys. So anyway, so we will talk about in the next class about more about momentum, inertia, and force. And once we talk about that, we'll talk about how these three concepts are used in this recovery of the rocket and the deployment of the satellite around the Earth. How everything comes together in the real world applications, and why it is very important to understand each and every point together and understand those points. Okay. So that was it for today. Thanks a lot. All right. Good night.